The year is 2001, and Microsoft has just launched their brand new console, the Xbox. But even though the competition landscape was not as set in stone as it is now, you couldn't just come in and be successful. The early 2000s were a time where games were going insane, but somehow, some way, Microsoft had a game that stood above them all. A game so bold, so innovative, so special. Halo Combat Evolved is what put Xbox on the map, a game that completely revolutionized first-person shooters. But this video is not about Halo 1's influence, because the crazy thing is that even though it was the first of its kind, Halo Combat Evolved stands out today as one of the most well-designed single-player shooters of all time. And in my opinion, it is the most well-designed shooter of all time. The first and most basic reason for this is the structure. The first level starts off basic, with the sandbox only consisting of the AR, Magnum, Plasma Pistol, and Plasma Rifle, and the enemies only being elites and grunts. Then the game evolves the gameplay loop with the second level where jackals are introduced. Then Truth and Reconciliation comes in with the hunters, again expanding the gameplay. Guilty Spark introduces the shotgun to counter the flood. We get a level to learn the flood completely, and then the game slowly infuses the flood with the Covenant. Halo Combat Evolved was not the first or only game to do this, but here you can clearly tell that it was focused on. It is so smooth in this game that you just have to appreciate it. For almost all the campaign, the player is experiencing new mechanics or mechanic combinations, but that's just the surface of the genius. The level design in this game is one of the best ever. Pretty much every sequence in this game has multiple ways to complete. It's actually insane. The game also makes sure to keep things fresh to the player. The enemy encounter design in this game is one of the best ever. It's especially significant because this is something that most games today don't even attempt anymore. Sometimes the enemies come out of life pods, sometimes they come down from a lift in sequences, sometimes they jump from the other platform in the distance, and sometimes it's the greatest example of enemy encounter design with the introduction of the Flood. The tactics and presentation is so underrated in this game. You never feel like you're just mindlessly going room to room. Everything feels alive. The game is also completely free of any restriction. There's no kill timers, invisible barriers, on-rail sections. If the physics engine allows it, then it's possible. This sort of freedom really doesn't seem like much, but you'd be surprised on how restrictions can influence a player. The fact that you're so free to go wherever you want to go in this game not only encourages exploration, it also ignites curiosity. But this game doesn't just keep things fresh from a design perspective. Every level is distinct and has its own visual atmosphere. And damn, do they have atmosphere. The Foreigner art style feels so grand and mysterious. This is a lot more personal to me, but playing through Foreigner sections always has me in awe. They feel so imposing and ancient. It always gets my mind wandering throughout Foreigner lore and what things mean. This game is just so beautiful and wondrous. And of course, the blood. Every enemy you kill feels impactful. Now guys, I know a lot of people misunderstood what I meant in my blood video when I said the word immersive. Listen. Immersive does not mean realistic. Learn the difference. Immersion is all about player feedback, and this game excels in that area. The combination of using projectiles and blood makes every kill feel like a kill, not plus 10 points. So now let's get into the more technical aspects of this game's design, starting with the control. Halo 1 feels so smooth even 20 years later. Everything from the movement, the aiming, the driving is actually not smooth, but it isn't super bad. Especially now in an age where a lot of games drift towards more automated control, this game feels so good. This game uses projectiles for the weapons, which of course works really well. You don't really have to lead your shots unless you're at an insanely long range, but the gunplay feels really responsive and consistent, and the sound effects are perfect. The weapon sandbox. Now this has to be one of the most important things in a shooter. The key to a good sandbox is for each weapon to have a meaningful role. You really have to avoid stagnation or repetitiveness because then a chunk of your sandbox will feel useless. Halo Combat Evolved sandbox is not the biggest in the world, but it is excellent. Every weapon has a role in the sandbox. They have their own purpose, but also their own weakness, and it works really well when the weapon sandbox connects with the enemy sandbox, like a chess game. Plasma weapons like the Plasma Pistol or Rifle are great against shields. They also fry the Sentinels, but there are much better options when it comes to the Flood and Flesh. See what I'm saying? The shotgun is really great at close range and great against Flood forms, but given that the Covenant is decently ranged, it's not a good idea to try to rush them like it's Doom. I also really love how the sniper can penetrate shields, but it just kind of flows through the Flood. It's genius. I would say the only weapon that really doesn't work is the Needler. It's trash in higher difficulties. I think the only reason you would pick it up is if you had no other option, but that's obviously not a good thing. I think the Needler is balanced when the enemies are shooting at you, because obviously if they could combine you in 2 seconds, that would be horrendous. But guys, this chest system is not only good for being a chest system. I'll talk about difficulty more later, but this game has a really good understanding of how weapons should operate against the player. The most obvious example being the precision weapons. You know why games like Halo 2 are so broken? Because enemies in that game have access to beam rifles and carbines. Halo Infinite tries to solve this problem by introducing the stalker rifle that doesn't one-shot the player, but it's still really broken. Now, I'm not saying that you can just dodge projectiles in this game, but enemies can't just instantly damage you or kill you from range. There is no BS in getting shot in this game. If you die, it's because you did something wrong. Now, Flood can sometimes carry magnums, but the Flood use horde tactics even when they have ranged weapons. Be serious, guys. The only enemy that isn't really fair is the rocket launcher Flood. Rockets are possible to be dodged, but their radius is super deadly. There are not a lot of them, and honestly, they're not close to the most unfair enemy I've ever seen, but they're still a problem. The weapon sandbox in this game is one of the best I've ever seen. There is so much strategy in managing your weapons because you only have 2 slots. Every gun serves a purpose and is meaningful to the gameplay. Expertly balanced to fight with and against. The vehicle sandbox in this game is good. I don't think games need super good vehicle sandboxes, and it doesn't really play too much into the experience, but if you want to be technical, I do think that this is the weakest selection out of all the Halo games. But honestly, that's not bad. I think every vehicle fills its purpose and they're used at the right times. They play really well into the game's design. The second level, where you get the Warthog for the first time, it's actually a good way to provide downtime between action by just driving and soaking in the ring. And this happens a good amount throughout the campaign, like on Silent Cartographer, 2 Betrayals, and then of course you have the insane Warthog run, which is so good. The enemy patterns while in vehicles can be annoying, specifically with the Banshees, which are predictable. Banshees are also pretty weak, so it's easy to shoot them down. The vehicles in this game only add to the gameplay in my opinion, and are cool to see. As I said before, the control is not the best, but it is consistent and satisfying to master. Now, another very underrated component of the sandbox is the power-ups. They're so simple, and it's crazy that it's never been done afterwards in any Halo game. Well, actually, I think Halo 3 had active camo, but not like Halo 1. Power-ups serve as a reward for the player's curiosity. They are always tucked somewhere that you can only find if you look for them. It's overshield and camo, which both work really well and allow you to do different things. It's more arcadey, but I love it. Also, health packs. Halo Combat Evolved has a health system where your shield can always recharge, but you need health packs to recover health. And I 100% prefer this over recharging health. There is just way too much strategy that goes into health packs to look past them. I will say, I think there could have been a few more health packs throughout some levels, but honestly, I think it's great either way. The enemy design in this game is, I'm gonna say it, the best ever. Every single enemy in this game is fair. They each of course have their own roles, but you also have to give a lot of credit to their AI. I don't know how, but after all this time, there only has been a few games to surpass Halo Combat Evolved's AI. I remember there was this one moment when I was playing Halo Combat Evolved on Legendary after Halo 2. I could not believe how easy it was. It seemed like I could just walk up to enemies and kill them. But at one moment, I lost my shield, so I walked up the tower and crouched. I threw a grenade so no one would follow me, but I genuinely was caught off guard when an elite rolled through and killed me. Obviously, an enemy following me like that is not that good of AI, but trust me, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The Covenant in this game are so reactive and fun to fight that it's insane. Grunts, to start, usually come in numbers and are usually used as pawns to overflow you, but it's very easy to kill them. They will also run away if their elite dies. Elites are possibly the best enemy in a game ever. It's that simple gameplay loop of taking out their shields and finishing them off, both stages taking different damage types. But the best thing about the elites is their AI. They roll away from grenades, push you when you're vulnerable, and they strafe when in combat. They also come in different roles and ranks. You have the weak-ass stealth elites, the gold elites that rush you, and depending on the color rank, they have more or less shield. The Jackal, so iconic. You obviously have to get past their shield. You can either slowly wear it down or get around it by splash damage, or you can shoot their hand and make them flinch. You can also scare them off. Hunters are very imposing and defensive, but they are slow, and they have that iconic weak spot on the back. All these enemies are satisfying to take down, and they play off each other in different ways. This has to be one of the most well-designed enemy factions of all time. It's simple, but bro, by now you should know that simple does not mean basic. It's the Covenant dance. Every aspect was clearly thought out and it shows. So by the 6th mission, you have gotten used to fighting the Covenant in that tactical way. All those strategies in your mind that you use and they use. All of that gets thrown out the window when you meet the Flood. This is obviously one of the best examples of structure, but I already talked about that. The Flood is not only a twist narratively, but also in terms of gameplay. Instead of using different tactics and giving you different reactions, the Flood just hoards you. And while that might sound garbage, it actually overwhelms the player. The Flood is designed to get close and make it uncomfortable. It's a perfect switch up from the Covenant. There are 3 main roles to the Flood: the Flood Spore, the Carrier Form, and the Combat Form. The Combat Forms can sometimes carry weapons, but their main objective is to rush you. They can also jump super far, which is super scary. The Infection Forms come in insane numbers, but are not really there to overwhelm you. Sure, it's uncomfortable to have like 20 of them sucking on your toes, but the real danger of them is as soon as you lose your shield, they will devour you. They can also reanimate dead bodies on the floor, which is genius. And then the Carrier Form, which will explode and release more Infection Forms. The explosion does do mad damage, but it's neutral. If you get them to explode the right way, it can send everything flying, which is also genius. The Flood in this game, I would argue, are on the level of the Covenant in terms of design. They are very responsive and satisfying to kill. I also really love the sound effects and visuals. The Flood dance puts a lot of pressure on the player and forces them to think on the fly, to stay composed. Of course, an expert decision to include these guys alongside the Covenant, but still really good on their own. And then you have the 3rd faction, but not really. The Sentinels in this game are great enemies. Firstly, they take the air, so that's already new, but they are probably the most satisfying to take down. To fry their circuits with plasma and watch them fall and explode never gets old. Really, where all this comes together is in the fact that these enemies fight each other. They are completely different factions, and that extra dynamic of them fighting each other brings even more strategy to the gameplay. It's insane how many layers there are that influence Halo 1's combat, and this just allows for epic battles between the guys. Also, you have the Marines, which truthfully aren't as interactable as the later titles, but do add to the scale of the battles in this game. They honestly offer a lot more to the story and atmosphere of the game because of how much character they have, but they still add a good amount to the gameplay. All of these elements add up to create the best design in the series. It's crazy, absolutely insane that they got it this good when it was 2001 and this game was supposed to be an RTS game. It's a height that Halo has never reached since, and I would argue no other game has since or before. Halo Combat Evolved's design is what makes it a masterpiece. The levels in this game are all their own experiences. Pillar of Autumn, such a great first level. It does a good job of keeping things simple, and the layout is really cool too. You get to fight through the interiors of the ship, and as you progress, the ship gets more destroyed. The presentation is top notch. Just such an enticing idea to base a level off of the ship being destroyed. Also, I really love this part where you find the top view of your cryopod. Obviously, what you see is iconic, but if you go around the back, you can see another room dedicated to another Spartan. Just things like that that really ignite imagination in this game. Halo. Possibly the most well-known Halo level of all time. Every single Halo guy describes himself like, "I still remember walking out of that drop pod." But the level itself is actually not my favorite. Obviously, the gameplay is still insane. That will never get old, but the objectives and terrain are kind of annoying. Really, it's the last part where you have to save Marines on these weird terrain pieces. The significance and idea of the level is really good as like characterizing the Halo ring as huge and mysterious, but they could have done a better job. Be honest. Truth and Reconciliation. This level is great. I love the nighttime atmosphere combined with the stealth. That section where the enemies get periodically dropped in from the lift is probably the best part of the level. And the first time going into the Covenant ship was really cool too. This is a really well-rounded level with a lot of different encounters. It's definitely iconic because of that stealth part and even the Covenant ship part. I guess it's hard not to be iconic when you're the first game in a very successful franchise, but still, it's a great level. Silent Cartographer is a level named Silent Cartographer. Do I really need to say anything else? Fine! Right off the bat, you get dropped off in an intense battle with the Covenant, and after that, you explore the island while fighting Covenant. That's not all. You then explore the Foreigner depths with that imposing atmosphere. If you don't like this level, just never talk, please. Assault on the control room. Holy crap, this level's great. You start with these Foreigner interiors, and then suddenly, the great mist of the beautiful snow. Your objective being to get to the control room, and I have to say that there's a good chance that this level will tire you out. I gotta admit, it happened to me. This level is really long. And when people say that Combat Evolved is repetitive, they're actually talking about this level. There are a lot of the same rooms back to back in this level. I truly believe that Bungie did a good job of making the rooms distinct with the encounter design, but it's still something to take note of in my opinion. Still, a good level. 343 Guilty Spark coming in with one of the most atmospheric sequences of all time with the introduction of the Flood. And when the Flood breaks loose, it's a great escape level. There is also good tension here that I enjoy a lot. Probably one of the most iconic reveals of all time. The Library is a level that a lot of people hate, but I truly love. This level takes my mind all throughout the mystery of the Foreigners and the Flood. I actually really like the Flood gameplay, so combining that with the music and atmosphere makes this out to be one of my favorite levels. 2 Betrayals! Such an action-packed level that has everything. Great interior sections and big open battles, but the real gem of this level is how dynamic everything is. Every single enemy faction is here and it makes for such an engaging experience. A lot of people say that this is one of the greatest Halo levels of all time, and I definitely agree. You guys are probably tired of me saying that, but this is Halo 1. We're at the top right now. Keys is a level where you go through this disgusting goo lagoon and fight both the Flood and the Covenant. And you again go up in the Covenant ship, except this time it's being destroyed by the Flood. This is genuinely one of my personal favorites. And then the greatest Halo level of all time, the Maw. Now obviously we cannot look past the super iconic Warthog run, which is such a climactic way to end the game, but the first 2/3 of this level are probably my favorite Halo campaign gameplay of all time. It's just insane how good it is returning to the Pillar of Autumn with all these different factions fighting each other. No level feels as complete to me as the Maw. Halo Combat Evolved has the best campaign of all time in terms of pure gameplay mechanics. Everything about it feels so fair and balanced with so many different possibilities for different situations. So many mechanics that play off each other so naturally that it's unreal. This game came out in 2001 and it's still the pinnacle. But guys, pure mechanics are not the only thing that goes into making a campaign. You also need a story. Now, Halo Combat Evolved does not have the best writing or depth ever, but it didn't have to. Now, I'm going to bring up an interesting point here. When Halo 2 came out, the story was actually divisive. And this is Halo 2, which is like top tier storytelling. But imagine, Halo 1 is the only game and you're getting hyped for Halo 2. Halo 1 had a much more simple story where the Covenant were portrayed as more alien, where in Halo 2, there was a much more complex story where the Covenant were, for lack of a better term, humanized. But the story in Halo 1 really works for this type of game. The more simple approach allows for the story to flow not only through the cutscenes, but the gameplay too. And by the time you're finished, it would feel like the end of a great adventure. This game has an engaging plot, likable characters, and most importantly, heart.
Coming here was reckless. You two know better than this. Thanks.
Overall, the campaign in this game is the definition of greatness. Such a fantastic adventure with insane gameplay mechanics. The experience is one of the greatest of all time. This is a game that has grown on me because the more I play games, the more I realize how much Combat Evolved got right. And it has my unending respect. But the campaign is obviously not the entire game. We have an entire other half, the multiplayer. Now I'm pretty sure that the entire multiplayer was built pretty late in development, and I'm not dismissing it at all, but the campaign is what defines Halo Combat Evolved to me and a lot of people. But then how good is the multiplayer? So the first thing that sticks out to me about Halo 1's multiplayer is the maps. It's interesting to think about this because the multiplayer was made with absolutely no expectations about balancing or esports. And because of that, we got some crazy maps in this game. Chiron TL34 and Boarding Action come to mind because of how unique their experiences are. These are actually good maps, even though they might not seem like it. The experience they offer is fun and unique to Halo 1 multiplayer. But then of course you have the more traditional expert maps. Halo Combat Evolved has my favorite map selection out of any game ever. And that's crazy, but it's true. All of the maps are unique and have so many different gameplay opportunities. Like the campaign, they all feel open. And most of them play well too. Another thing that I really appreciate is the atmosphere. These maps are so good looking. I remember there was one moment where I was looking up in the sky and I realized that the planet is the same one from the opening cutscene. It's kind of obvious looking back, but still, that blew my mind. Each of these maps tell a story visually and have so much wonder to them. But how is this multiplayer's design? Now, I think the spawning is the only thing that really shows how this game wasn't meant to be played online, but it's honestly not even that noticeable to me. Halo Combat Evolved is a lot more fast-paced, where the player can die a lot faster than in other Halo games, which I like. The weapon balancing is actually good in my opinion. Yes, the Magnum is the primary, but be serious, guys. Everybody always complains about having to use the Magnum to do good, but that's literally true for any other Halo game. You always switch to your precision weapon. In reality, I think the Magnum is good everywhere, but it takes a lot of skill to really outclass weapons at their own roles. I'm being serious, guys. It's actually viable to use the assault rifle at close range. The weapons sandbox also introduces the fuel rod cannon and flamethrower. The flamethrower is pretty hard to use effectively, but come on, it's a flamethrower. I personally really like the weapon sandbox in multiplayer, and I think it works well. There is no stagnation, and every weapon has its own role. Not much to complain about here. Now, just like the campaign, you have health packs and power-ups, which I think are cool, more strategy and everything. Although, it isn't as impactful because of how fast the player dies anyway. You really don't have to manage it too much, but it's still good for being there. The vehicle sandbox is also good. It's actually really weird to play a Halo game where vehicles aren't insane kill machines. It's very easy to take down vehicles, so you really have to be smart when you're in one. I really like this, and I feel like it really elevates the bigger game modes. Overall, I really do like the Halo Combat Evolved multiplayer. I don't think that I can really take it too seriously because there isn't really much content. It's really fun to play for the most part, but it's just 4v4 in big team battle. Of course, I think the core mechanics are great, but the multiplayer overall probably needed a bit more. It's safe to say that it includes the best big team battle Halo has ever seen. Halo Combat Evolved is the game that put Xbox on the map and has influenced pretty much every FPS game that came after it. But the game itself is still great and is the closest a first-person shooter's game mechanics have ever come to perfection. So I give Halo Combat Evolved a 9 out of 10.